Glad you could make it, and good to catch up again. It's been a few weeks since you and I connected. What's it like where you are at the moment? Are you guys locked up again?
Well, we're not completely locked up. I'm a little bit north of Boston, and depending on what state you live in, the rules vary. So, right now, in most government buildings, you have to wear a mask, but outside and depending on the business, you may or may not. So, we just live in a
Mm,
crazy time where the rules seem to vary by place and location and day of week,
right.
and
Yeah.
we try to do the best that we can.
Yeah. I hear you. I hear you. We're seeing all kinds of different things in different states as well. So it's going to be an interesting period still. We are hoping to be out of it and get back to normal, whatever normal is. I'm sure that's going to be a great topic for coaches and so on to really dive into those areas.
Sure.
So
What was your normal and what is normal, and
yeah,
how do you connect with other people's normal, etc.
yeah, and who wants to be normal anyway? Right. So it's cool. Ed, just a little bit of background for people watching this. You're founder at Excellius Leadership Development, right? How long has that been operating now? It's been quite a while, I believe, right?
Well, I've been operating as independent for about 15 years.
Right.
So I started Excellius when I left my last corporate
Mm,
opportunity. And today, even though I've gone through various versions of the business, today I focus on one-on-one leadership coaching, team coaching,
right.
smaller business strategy, and workshop facilitation. So
Mm,
all of those can be fairly active.
yeah, yeah. And congratulations. I think you said you launched your second book. Is that right?
I did. So Drive Your Career, which launched last September, September 2020, is now out and available on all your favorite local online retailers. And it's great talking about the lessons that I've learned in the last 15 years
Mm-hmm.
from my clients. These are all real stories from real clients that have come up again and again and again as the years have gone by. So I'm thrilled to be able to share it with others.
Yeah, and I have a couple of colleagues that really about the stories, and we were having an interesting conversation the other day about some people go a little bit too far with the stories that it becomes bragging, and then you get and you've been pitched that, right? Let me show you how you can make $1 million in your first year or whatever, or your six figures, right? Versus the humble, stories of being in the trenches, and really love to hear some of the things that you've come across and coming out of a corporate world and doing what you're doing. It's very exciting. Hmm.
Well, and just a quick observation, bosses need to know things that are going well for you and your organization. So if the story you're telling is true, even though it feels like you're, patting yourself on the back, you should feel comfortable sharing it because your boss is going to be in the elevator with the CEO one day, and the CEO is going to say, "So what's going on with your group? How are things going?" And your boss is going to want to have stories that they can share to show how effective and productive the work team is. If you don't share those true stories, they can't answer that question very well at all, which is a little different than somebody saying, "Hey, I can help you make six figures in 6 months. Just follow my lead," right? Because that's how they're making their money.
Right.
And more often than not, because we all are on a different journey, it doesn't work for everyone. So I would encourage people to ensure that they do tell their boss things that are going well and things that they need to be doing differently to be effective, and not feel like it's bragging
Mm.
because it is true and
Mm.
others need to know.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, it resonates. There is another side to that that I've experienced, and that is, engineers working for organizations tend to think that the bosses won't understand what they're talking about. So, no point sharing the stories or getting into anything technical. So, I guess we got to watch that too, eh?
Well, yeah, you always want to watch your language. You want to ensure you know your audience. So, if you're talking about something that you've done effectively and you're an engineer, work in engineering or information technology, you can't speak techno speak because the other person's just not going to appreciate it. So,
Mm.
Good contributors and good leaders kind of know how to convert what they're doing into language that you'll understand or perspectives that you'll understand so you can share the enthusiasm, right? Nobody wants to go and beat their chest about something they've accomplished and have me look at you and say, I have no idea what you just said.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
have no reason to think it's good. Can you tell me about it in a language that I can understand?
Yes, yes. I actually had that, just a quick story. There you go. Yesterday, I was in a meeting with the University of Calgary here on a project that we're working together on, which is to do with artificial intelligence. And the student was so excited to present what they were doing, but it was so technical. I had to turn to the professor and say, "Can you translate that in English for me?" So it's funny,
That's
but
a, that's, a, that's a person who didn't know their audience
yeah, yeah,
particularly well.
yeah. But it's they're young, and there's so much to learn. And as you know, we focus on behavior intelligence, and this is probably a good segue of there is just so much that we need to know about our own behaviors, the behaviors of others, in order to effectively communicate. And I'm sure you find that in what you're doing, it's probably a big part of that.
Oh, definitely. In my 15 years of practice and in the number of years that I've lived, my clarity keeps getting better and better. And I do believe that there are certain core behaviors that we all need to do without all of the complexity and systems and processes, et cetera, in order to connect better with others. And certainly, two key behaviors along the lines of what you're suggesting are curiosity and listening. And
Mm,
we're just not curious enough about what others are doing. We want to talk about what we're doing and not what you're doing.
right.
And when we, if we are even curious from time to time, we're also not great listeners. And so we're always ready to talk about what's coming next. There's a famous saying, lots of people listen to prepare what to say next versus listening for understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And we just be more curious and listen to understand because then what I have to say will connect better because now I know more about what you're
Right.
thinking and why you're thinking it versus not doing those two behaviors at all.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's also a very important point. I'm glad you bring that up, because we also see the people that um, listening and get triggered. I guess is the best way for me to describe it, into wanting to now respond. If they're an extrovert, they interrupt and they don't get the rest of the story. If they're an introvert, they overthink the answer of what they want to say. They're no longer listening, but they're also getting anxious within themselves, to the point that what they want to say doesn't come out right at the end anyway. So the the trick for them, that I found, is to say, what, just write down what you want to say so you get it out of your head and come back and listen. Do you find that sort of thing, or what suggestions would you give people for that sort of situation?
Well, we all meet and work with people who have preferences for extroversion and introversion. One of my favorite quotes is that extroverts like to talk first and think second, and introverts like to think first and talk second. So it's all about, from my perspective, self awareness, which is I'm never interested in changing you or helping you be different unless you want to be and you want to evolve into something a little bit different than you are today. That's totally cool. And happy to help you do that. But I do want you to be highly self-aware to how others are experiencing you. So if you have a preference for introversion, that's totally fine. You need to understand how people experience that. And another great example, and perhaps you've read the book Quiet by Susan Cain, she talks about how bad brainstorming is for people with a preference for introversion, because we are leading a meeting and the leader of the meeting says, okay, I want everybody's ideas. Let's start tossing them out there. And the extroverts, of course, are just throwing left and right anything that they can think of.
Yeah.
And I might look to you and say, Nagi, you're not saying anything. Speak up. And the inference is that I'm either disconnected, not engaged, don't have any good ideas, when in reality, if I have a preference for introversion, I'm thinking. Now, ask me tomorrow what I think, and I'll have a dozen great ideas. But I'm just not the type of person to just toss up an idea because it might appear in my head. So brainstorming doesn't work as effectively as the following example, which is if I do want to do something like brainstorming, give everyone a week's notice and say, okay, at next week's meeting, I'm going to ask you the question, what can we do different in 2022 than we're doing now? And I'd love to hear your answers. And that gives everyone a chance to prep themselves better. The extroverts can cut out kind of the crazy ideas that they were going to say, and the introverts can prepare the ideas that they would want. So notice, advance notice, and transparency are super effective to ensure that everybody can participate equally.
Yeah. We found often the value of the introverts actually is really important because they were listening. Whereas, back to your point, the extroverts, they're speaking first and thinking second. The introverts have been sitting there listening and taking all that information and thinking through it, and they actually have probably the answers. They're just not given a chance because the extroverts interrupt them and don't let them speak. We could go on this for quite a bit, right? But
we could, and it's also important to recognize that extroverts and introverts always have good ideas, as you're saying. They just get them at different points of the time. So it's not a matter of engagement or intellect, but it's just a matter of when are those ideas coming to me. And if I'm, as a leader, if I'm not taking that into consideration as I'm leading people, I'm missing, fantastic opportunity to ensure I'm getting as many great ideas as possible.
Right. Yeah. It sounds a little bit old school, if you like, if you don't mind me saying that. You and I have probably, grown up with this. Are you finding that this kind of thinking is new to a lot of people in the workplace these days, or they've just forgotten it and they need to be woken up and realize it again?
So that's a really interesting question because, I don't know, and I'm not a sociologist, so I've not studied this, but, it just seems as though these challenges and perspectives have always been there, and I suspect they always will be there until we start teaching kids in junior high and high school how to be more curious and the benefits of that, how to listen better and the benefits of that, how to demonstrate more empathy and the benefits of that, how to navigate conflict effectively. We're always going to have people who don't have any of that training who land in a leader's seat and now have to be curious, listen, demonstrate empathy, and navigate conflict and have no idea how to do it.
Right. Yeah.
So I think these challenges and issues will always be there until we modify how we are raising people in respect to how to interact more effectively with others. I'm amazed that today, in the year that we in, that there's no class in a junior high or high school that talks about personality preferences and how people are different, and we're not all the same. And even though we may wear uniforms at school that have us all look the same, or we're all in the same class, our preferences, our biases, our histories, our interests are completely different. And until you can be more knowledgeable on that, you and I will always be employed.
Yes, we can't grow them that way,
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting, So curiosity, that's a very big one for a lot of people, and it 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 hits a lot of areas. And I'll just use one or two examples that I've seen recently. I was teaching a group the other day, and I said, how important curiosity is. And so the following week, all the messages that I'm seeing, all the communication I'm seeing, had the word curious in it. And I'm going, whoa, hang on a minute. That just because you're using the word isn't really necessarily doing what you're supposed to do. You need to ask questions. That's how you demonstrate curiosity. Um, so, and in marketing, that's such an important thing. People growing up in the corporate world, like yourself and myself, we were trained to do your research, do your homework, put the presentation together, and pitch it. Um, but it lacks that question and curiosity. Um, you're smiling, so I'm guessing you've got some of the same experiences or similar ones, or I'd like to hear some of your stories on that.
Sure. Well, again, to me, curiosity is a key leadership style. I tend to think we overcomplicate curiosity, and I do think it happens at different levels. And level one, which I think is highly effective, but most people tend to avoid either because it's so simple or they're just not been raised and trained to be curious, are basic questions like, why do you think that?
Mm.
Where is that idea experienced and how are others experiencing it, right? Just basic curiosity to get the person talking more about why they think what they think. Either I came to this conclusion through research or I listened to it on Facebook from some person who says they're an expert. But I'm curious about
Mm.
why you think this and where it's coming from. This is so hard to do because our number one desire is to share and tell people why your perspective is more correct.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm building up this energy as you're talking to jump in and say it. So,
Yeah.
when I work with folks, I oftentimes quote habit number 5 from Stephen Covey's great book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yeah.
And habit number 5 is seek first to understand, then to be understood. And I promise you that if in organizations more people were more curious and attempted to understand others first before they attempted to be understood, we would have a much different professional experience. But unfortunately, we've not been raised that way.
Yeah.
We're always expected to have the answer. When you and I went to junior high and high school and college, we were expected to know the answer, right? We went to class and the teacher would say, who is the 5th president of the United States, or what are countries in the globe that start with the letter A, and you had to know.
Right.
There weren't opportunities to be curious with the teacher and share that type of information. So I see an absence of this in almost every organization I work in.
Yeah.
I see an absence of this in almost every leadership style. What I see is a desire to tell and ensure other people know what I know, and they know how much I know. They know how good I am because of how much I know, and we don't share or don't demonstrate enough curiosity to help other people achieve whatever it is that they're looking to achieve.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of the um, uh, the graduates, the MBAs, and so forth, I think like to stand behind the labels that they throw out, as opposed to, and that's the answer that you're talking about. I think that's how I relate to it. They want to, throw out the answer and look how good I am. I've got this label that identifies what's going on, but we haven't really taken people on the journey to get to the understanding to come to the same conclusion. And so curiosity is back to day one when they were first curious about learning what this label is. What was the journey that they went on, right? And
right.
Can you?
One of the classic examples we hear for curiosity, and this is a very specific example, but this is used time and time again, is if somebody comes to your office and says, "Hey, I have a problem," and they share it with you, we have an inclination to answer it. and say, oh, here's what you should do, here's who
Right.
you should call, because that's why you came to me. And what experts would say a better thing to do to help that person learn more is to say, well, what do you think we should do? Again, a very simple question. I haven't answered anything. I haven't thought about anything. I listened to what you had to say,
Yeah.
and I said, okay, I think I hear what you're hearing. Maybe I paraphrase it just to say, let me just make sure I understand the situation you're dealing with. What would you do? And if the person says, I don't know, that's why I came to you,
Right.
say, well, here, this is what I'd love us to do. Why don't you take a few days, unless it's urgent, but why don't you take a few days and come back and see me with 3 ideas of things that you think we could do to solve this problem, and let's then talk about it. And off they go, and hopefully in that exercise they end up solving the very same problem they came to see you about. I didn't have to answer it, I didn't have to think about it, I just helped you dig a little bit deeper and answer the very concern that you thought you didn't have the answer to.
Yeah, yeah. I love the Dr. Phil question. How's that working for you?
Well, but look at that. It's such a basic, easy question.
Yeah.
Somebody comes. I mean, this happens. I know people at work. In my book, Drive Your Career, I have a chapter called "Play the Hand You've Been Dealt," and people love to tell me their stories about what they're currently experiencing at work. They don't talk enough about what they're going to do about it, and so I can sit there and very politely listen and let them share with me the myriad of issues that they're dealing with. And then I could take out the Dr. Phil question and say, so how is that working? Because I guarantee you the answer is going to be not well.
Yeah.
Right? This isn't working well. Okay. So let's now talk about what we're going to do about it. Right? Thank you for sharing the history with me. It was interesting. But now let's talk about what you're going to do differently to modify and impact your experience versus just getting stuck in the history. So many people love getting stuck in what I'm experiencing and why it's so bad. And let me tell you 10 examples. And it's interesting to a point, but it doesn't help solve the problem.
Right, right. Now, Ed, one of the things that I discovered through the neuroscience and the research the work that I've done is we're all different, we're wired differently based on our past conditioning, etc. We won't go into how we became who we are, but the one area that you talked about is an interesting one, because what we found is there are some people that, and we call them procedure people versus options people. Okay. And not to split them up like you're one or the other. We have everything, so you've got a bit of both. And some people, when they're stuck with a problem, and we ask the question, well, what do you think you should do? They're able to come up with a bunch of ideas, and maybe they're just not certain about which ones to use, and they want to talk through it, etc. So that's an options person. What we've also found is there are procedure people that have been trained through their whole upbringing that they need to be given the answers. They need to be told what steps to follow. And so I see a lot of business owners, and maybe you come across the same thing, where they try to use this approach and they get really frustrated to the point of almost angry at the person coming back saying, I don't know. Can you tell me? Can you help me? Right? Because they don't understand how that person's brain has been conditioned to get there. And we can retrain that. Obviously, we can help people through that to develop new ways. But is that something that you've seen? I'm sure you've seen it, but does that resonate? Yeah.
Oh, definitely. And I think there's a number of options that might come into play. And of course, you and I are speaking very generally, so don't take these responses literally for every issue that might be out there. But first off, you might have the wrong person in the wrong role, right? So if this is a role that we need to be thinking about options, and if you're in sales and you've got to come up with creative ways to approach a client, and I'm not an options person, I just may not be in the right role. And exactly. My job is not to evolve you. My job is to say, hey, here's what we need, and you're in that role. I'll provide you tools and capabilities to get better, but you've got to step up to the plate and evolve in that way. And if not, then maybe we should find something else that's good for you. The second thing I would tell you is that this person might utilize one of my favorite internal tools, which is an accountability partner. Just because you're asking me what would I do doesn't mean I can't ask anyone else. So if
Yeah.
I have a colleague or friend or a next door neighbor or a relative who, I think is an options
Mm,
person or is very creative, etc.,
yeah.
say, hey, can I talk with you for a couple of minutes?
Mm,
I'm having a situation at work and I need to come up with some options and I'd love to kick it around with you.
mm,
I would tell you that in almost every workshop I host and in almost every virtual workshop that I host, people have all the answers. I rarely have to tell somebody something where they're like, Ed, I have no idea. Because
mm.
when I ask them the Dr. Phil question of how's that working for you, or our question of do you have some options that you could think about, if they are given some time and an opportunity, they actually will come back with
Mm,
some, well, hey,
yeah.
I don't know if these will work, but what
Mm,
about this? Or I remember a couple of years ago we did something, maybe that, right?
yeah.
I wouldn't care if I was a leader how good your options were. I mean, I would expect them to be appropriate, but
Mm,
it's more that you took the effort to think about. And this
right.
is a skill that you need to learn. We operate in a very fast-paced environment. Our corporate cultures are very fast-paced. Things today will not be true tomorrow. And unless you're able to navigate and come up with options and are flexible, you just won't
Mm,
fit in many places. I'm not saying you won't fit permanently,
yeah.
but maybe there's another role that you should go into that can better suit your personality preferences.
Yeah. Yeah. No, really good points, and just looking at the time, we're going to be talking for hours if we're not careful here. But I think you captured so much in that last little bit, and I just want to capture some of the points. Eh, are they in the right role? And I talk about some things depending on the role that you want people to be in. If you're a leader, you may need to develop this skill, and so let's let's help you develop the ability to come up with options and so forth by asking you questions and the peer-to-peer accountability. I call it, you call it accountability partners. Um, this allows them to start developing, and the third part of that is leaders get frustrated with people that they don't understand, and you've just identified some really great tools for them to work through and be able to coach, because leaders, you would agree, obviously, leaders need to learn how to become a coach. We can't be there for them all the time. Right? So there's almost a skills transfer that they need to learn how to do, and a lot of leaders don't want to do that. And again, I digress because of the time here. I'm just watching that, but a lot of leaders go, "Yeah, can you come in and fix them?" I'm going, I think the problem, stems over here. Maybe we need to sit down and teach you how to do that, because I'm not going to come in and help you with your people every time you have a problem. So you need to learn to
Yeah.
become one, right? Mm.
Well, absolutely. The biggest piece of advice that I would share to our listeners is you should build your own self awareness on how others experience you, and you should help others build their self awareness, because the more you know about how whoever you are experienced by others, better you can manage it. If you do not know how people experience you, you're going to be blind in respect to what you're doing and how you're doing it, and you will be the proverbial bull in the china shop because you just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to build your self awareness on how others experience you, and you need to help others. And I just believe in organizations where self awareness is high, and I know my strengths,
Yeah.
I know my areas of opportunity, and I'm doing things to improve those areas of opportunity. That will be a much better place to work, and a place that's so focused on what we're doing that we don't spend enough time on how we're doing it, and the hows continue to conflict with the what's, so that
Yeah.
nothing gets done.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so much more to talk about. Love to have you back, Ed. It's very exciting. You and I are obviously aligned with, it doesn't matter what you call it. I call it behavior intelligence. And there are many layers within that, from, understanding the behavior, the thinking, the way people are programmed. And then, but the whole purpose is really to, as you said, teach people to become more self-aware or guide them to become more self-aware so that they get better results from themselves. When they do that, they get better results in their lives, in the
Right.
companies, everybody flourishes. And maybe one day we'll have less wars and politicians and
That would be nice.
yeah, yeah. It comes down to that understanding, but I digress again. Mate, it was great talking to you. It was an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to having you back. I think there's just so much more here that we can talk about.
Fantastic. Yeah, I really enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you for letting me join your show.
Take care.